Hello, my name's Mark Milinkovic. I'm a specialist analyst in the spatial team at the City of Melbourne. This is going to be an attempt to further document the 3D modelling process in a bit more detail, hopefully take you through generating a model with FME, importing it into Lumion, and then some Lumion bits and pieces to get you started. The first step is to generate your model, but before we do that, we actually need an extract area. So for this example, we're going to be using the City Grid dataset. So this is an Arc Pro project that has all our various layers we're going to be using loaded into it. You can see the city grids there with their labels. In this particular instance, we're going to be using grid B215. You can see there a whole bunch of things have been loaded in, like park status, carriageway, building footprints, all the sort of stuff that's going to end up in our 3D model. Okay, so this is the FME workbench. There's a little note there. All you really need to do here is enter the city grid reference. So in this instance, we're changing it to B215. That's all you kind of have to do, but there's obviously a lot more going on. So as I scroll through, or rather zoom out, you'll see this sort of monster of an FME workbench, which has been created to make these 3D models. So we'll go through a couple of the things that are in there. Down the bottom, the sort of, I guess, the main core components of the aerial photograph and the LOD models. The bottom data sets are sort of the, I guess, the simpler ones. So the asset insertion points like public lighting, seating, litter bins, bike hoops, that sort of thing. And as we start to go further up, you'll get into some more complex stuff. So now we get into our services like river, road line marking, bike lanes, tramway. There's a whole heap of these that have obviously been put in. Right up the top, though, you get into the even more, I guess, not difficult, but more complex ones. So these are where we break down the surfaces into their individual components. So for instance, recreational surface will break down into sort of basketball court, tennis court and the like. Carriageway and footpath will break down into their individual surface types. But like I said, provided I've kept this up to date and done my job, hopefully you won't have to worry too much about it. So this is just showing the carriageway types, but all you should really have to worry about is connecting an extract area to be run out and then making sure in this instance that the correct grid is used. Alright, so to produce one of those city grid tiles takes between 5 and 15 minutes. Obviously the bigger extract area or the more complex the underlying data, the longer it's going to take. So this particular output is in SketchUp, although there has been testing to do 3ds, FBX and a number of other 3D file types. What you're going to want to do is check the model that's been exported. So they don't always come out perfect. I can already see some imperfections in this one, but as far as a starting point for a project, I mean, it's looking pretty good. You can see sort of the complexity of the terrain coming downhill here with the roadway and all our bike lanes and parking and everything sort of modeled in for us to start. So what I want to show here is as these models are exported, you can see that each particular element of the model has been assigned a color and a status. And this is going to help later on for texturing. So we can see not only that it's a curb, but its type. We can see that that's a parking bay. And the reason for this is to make the import into Lumion even easier to texture up and see exactly what we're doing. There are some other bits and pieces. So underneath there is an aerial photograph that's been referenced to the exact location. So here's just a little trick. If you set that to projected, you can actually use the aerial photograph to then texture various elements of the model. So what I'm going to do here is change my carriageway to the aerial photograph. So things like our road line markings and the locations of cars are going to appear on the carriageway rather than just a flat texture, which can come in handy later on for if we want to model up even more detail. But as a starting point, you can just use the carriageway and replace that as a texture later on. One of the other things it's worth pointing out that each one of the components is a group. So you can see there, I've actually started to remove various groups. So it's not just all a mess of modeling that's been smashed into one file. Everything retains a grouping. So sitting underneath this, you've obviously got your single file, which we've already seen, but there's various components that make up that single file. So you can see all the individual pieces there, and then underneath at the top is the more complex services as well. So broken down into their individual pavement types in this instance. So quickly open up a few of these just to have a look. So for instance, carriageway is the isolated and pre-textured version of the carriageway. So you can see that there. And if I move around, you'll actually be able to see that the terrain is built into it. So what ends up happening is each of these individual components is created as a surface and then textured and then locked back together almost like a jigsaw puzzle. I mentioned earlier that um, it's important that we sort of group all these together so the output is not just a bulk of modeling that we can't sort of edit or interact with. You can see here the footpaths and their various surfaces are coloured to give the different types. But yeah, there's obviously an awful lot of components that hopefully you won't have to worry about that are sitting there behind the scenes. Right, for those who haven't seen this before, this is Lumion. Just a little bit of housekeeping at the start. So I usually configure these layer types to have a couple of different names. So you can see there base, trees, assets, cars and people, which are going to be things that we want to add into the scene layer on. The reason for this is we don't want to just have everything end up piled into one scene that we can't sort of easily interact with. So first things first, obviously we've got a reasonably blank scene with sort of standard view here. So what we need to do is import our model. We'll need to click place and then import new model under, of course, under the import models button there. I'll go through all these different model types later on. We'll need to navigate to where our model is stored. In this case, it's that B215 SketchUp model. Now we have it there. So when we import it, a couple of things. So you're going to want to give it a name, probably something that can be easily searched. And there's a category folder option there as well. So I've got all my projects that are listed out here, which makes it easier to find things you're looking for later on. It's going to put this into testing. Now there's going to be a big nasty cut here where I wait for this model to import, but I'll join you back in a sec. All right, we're back. This will hopefully not take too long on import. Once it imports, it'll be locked to your cursor, so you can see me struggling to drag it around. A single left click will place it in your scene, and then we can move around our scene. We can see B215 in all its glory. It's easy enough just to grab the insertion point and move the model around, and you can move through it with your standard WASD keys and the mouse. One of the things I do is set it at 5, 5, and 5. The reason for this is if you set it to 0, 0, 0, there's a good chance it's going to clip through the floor and then you won't be able to see all the detail. And of course, you probably just want to go through and check everything is as it should be. In this instance, we can see insertion points, some fences. You can have a look at that great terrain. And what we're going to do now is get to some texturing. All right, so you have your model in, and we want to start looking at texturing it up. So I'm going to zoom in, and we're going to have a look at some of the, I guess, larger services first. So probably park status and the carriageway. What you need to do is click on materials, which is going to be how you house your texturing. So you'll notice that it's picked up all our surface types there. So parking bays, channel, public lighting, all those things that we configured in FME now make it really easy to texture up our scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some grass first. So if we click on park status, there is an absolute massive library of materials. I'd probably say go through these at your leisure, but from this instance, we're just going to look at some basics. So in this instance, I've selected clean cut grass, and it's changed that flat color into these lovely individual blades of grass. Not only that, but there's actually options behind each one of these. So if you double click on the texture, what you'll see here is you can go through and adjust its length, adjust its size, its curliness, its roughness, and this is for just about every texture within the software itself. You can really sort of make these scenes your own and customize them. So in this instance, we're going to look at the road hot mix asphalt. So we've got our asphalt textures. And again, so the ones down the end, we select one of our textures and it's going to change out that color for our lovely 3D photo texture. We can zoom in and see how that really quickly changes up our scene, which is awesome. Again, there's all sorts of options we can change here, so we can adjust the color, sort of make it lighter, make it darker. There's reflectivity, gloss, displacement, transparency, orientation. One of the ones that I do like is the weathering, so you can sort of make it dirty so the whole scene doesn't just look like a clean room. But yeah, you can see really quickly there how we can change that scene. So it would probably take us a while to go through and individually texture each one of these. But what we can do is save a material set, which is what we're going to have a look at next, and that will hopefully save you a lot of time. What I'm going to do now is loading a material set. So I've pre-created a material set which sort of saves out a whole series of textures and then can load it into a scene. And because we're reusing an FME workbench, this can be used every time that's used. So when I load the material set, it's going to go through and try and find matches for materials in there. You can see it's found quite a number of things there. And when you click overwrite materials, it's going to go in and hopefully, like you see there, replace those materials for you. So you can see our bike lanes have come in, our parking bays, our parking bay line work. You can sort of get an idea of the level of detail there. Not all of them have been picked up, so you can see that there's obviously a green splodge there. That footpath hasn't been picked up, but we can quickly go through and update those ourselves. In this instance, I can actually take that mulch texture for shrub bed by copying it, and this will enable you to transpose it into another feature. So for instance here, nature strip, you have to assign it a texture first. So I'm just going to give it a default glass texture and then use that to paste our mulch in and then continue to fill the scene out. We'll see for our footpath, so it hasn't picked that up, so we can go in and look at concrete and start flicking through our various concrete textures, hopefully find something we like. And these can all be, as we saw previously, color changed and update the reflectivity. But once you've found something that you're happy with, yeah, you can really start to fill these scenes out. And you can save your own material sets and yeah, and reuse them each time to save yourself a bunch of hassle. Right, so arguably this is the most fun part of the process and what people think of think of as playing The Sims. So we're going to start filling this scene out with models. So we're going to use firstly we're going to set our layer to trees and start putting in some tree models. You can see there's a huge library of trees that we can use. Selecting the tree you want, you've got a nice scale there with it, so you can see how big the model is going to be. That'll replace your cursor with the model each time, so you can preview it. But yeah, single left click will start adding these various models into your scene. You can move around and start placing them like I'm doing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly fill out this scene and give you an idea of what it's like. But then we'll sort of have a look at a more established scene as an endpoint after. So you can see here me flicking through various scales of this this same big leaf maple tree. But there's all sorts of options we can access here as well. So with these tools, we can select all the identical objects. We can randomize their rotation and scale to give that scene not a sort of stark look where every tree sort of looks exactly the same, which is great. Yeah, and you can zoom right in, have a look around, have a look at the levels of detail. But it's not. Here we are, just adding in even more, even more types of trees. I'd forgotten I'd done this. So yeah, so some cherry bark oaks just to sort of fill that out even more. The Lumion trees are hyper optimized, so you shouldn't establish any sort of slowdown as you go through. What I thought we are going to do is, jump over to cars, so you can start to slowly add your car models in here. You can see they're not parked particularly well by default, but we'll remedy that quite quickly. So placing these one by one, you get a randomized color, which is great. You can then sort of select your cars and move them so they're sitting in those bays properly as a group, and then individually go through and move them, which is fine if you're just dealing with 6 cars. But if you're dealing with a sort of a large amount, this is obviously going to take up quite a bit of your time. And if you're as pedantic as I am with this stuff, you sort of want everything lined up and sitting properly, and it just becomes quite a big job. So there are tools that have been built in to help you out with that as well. One of them in particular is this mass placement option. So what this is going to do, it's going to define a location of where we want our models placed. So I've got a nice straight line. I can adjust the number of items. I can adjust the direction. As you can see here, I've just put 15 cars facing one direction. Now, it's only giving me the one model, but I can start to add in different models. And that's going to vary up not only the model, but it's going to vary the color as well. So you can get a nice sort of randomization for your scene. You might want to add in some SUVs, you might want to add in some vans, you might want to add in some sports cars. You can see there the massive amount of you know, models that you have at your disposal to fill these scenes out. There's a few other sort of options here, like the one that I'm probably going to use is that offset from line to sort of space them out so they're not perfectly uniform. But once that's done, you hit tick, and you're good to go. You've got a huge amount of cars that you can place up really, really quickly. And these are very, very detailed models. So excuse my poor navigation here. We're going to sort of scroll down and have a look. Even each individual car sort of most of them, sorry, have people modeled in. I can't do anything about them being left-hand drive, sadly, but you can show the driver, you can turn the lights on and off. If we move up to this one, which you can see a little bit better, you can see they're flicking the lights on and off. Turn the driver on and off. If it's parked, you can adjust the color manually. These are really quickly and easy to be customized. I mean, they added this in a few versions ago, but we can even set Victorian license plates, which will randomly generate a license plate for each car in your scene. Again, just making it a bit more realistic and fleshing these out even more. All right, so this is very much what I've created earlier, which has already been filled out. You can see I've already got got my trees in, got cars in. I've actually tried to match these trees up to the real world. The cars not so much. As we zoom through, you can see we've got a large amount of detail here. So we've got our people in, we've got power lines, we've got various parking assets. A considerable amount of work has been done upgrading the building facades, which is another kettle of fish entirely. We can look at that at another time. I just wanted to sort of show you a more sort of filled out scene, and and what can be I guess achieved pretty quickly with this process. You can see here me start to flick things on and off. I mean, I mentioned this at the start, but this is how we make our scenes customizable and how it's easier to interact with. It also allows us to do things like variation control if we have multiple layouts that we're going to be using. But I just wanted to sort of quickly show what a more filled out scene will look like. Just one more thing I think I would add in is that it is possible obviously to do animation as well. So in this instance, I have the animation turned on so you can see people and bikes moving around the scene. This is great for exporting video. You'll obviously see some inconsistencies. So there's someone stuck in the bike lane there in place, but these are some of the little issues that we have to tweak as we go through it. All right, so that is a crash course in Lumion and all things 3D modeling. Obviously, that workflow only creates current state. I mean, if we're talking about modeling up something that's been planned, it's a completely different kettle of fish and probably another make more than 20-minute video on that. But look, hopefully that will give you some insights into how these scenes are put together and how they're generated. As always, any questions, any comments, just let me know. But thank you for your time.